Why would a harmless joke destroy a marriage that seemed unshakable? How could one woman's attempt to sound clever at a dinner table turn into the end of everything she built? The night I made that joke about sleeping with his boss, I thought people would laugh. Thomas didn't. My name is Nadia Voss. I'm 31, and I used to think being funny made me untouchable. If people laughed, they liked you. If they liked you, they forgave you. That was my formula for surviving in every room, from high school parties to office dinners. My husband, Thomas, never really got it. He's 35, works in architecture, quiet, patient, the kind of man who pauses before he speaks. I used to tease him for it. I'd tell him he needed me to keep life interesting. He'd just smile and say, "Interesting doesn't always mean good." I should have listened. We'd been married 4 years when the firm where he worked started inviting me to their events. The first few times I behaved. I smiled, wore neutral dresses, and said polite things about buildings I didn't understand. But the more I watched those wives sitting quietly beside their husbands, the more restless I felt. They looked like props. I wasn't going to be one. I wanted Thomas's boss and co-workers to see that I was different, clever, confident, unforgettable. The night everything changed, we were at a corporate gala in a downtown hotel. The room glowed with gold lights, waiters carrying trays of champagne. Thomas was nervous. This was his chance to impress Elliot Crane, the firm director. I, on the other hand, just wanted people to notice me. I laughed a little too loud, drank a little too fast, and made a few jokes that probably landed harder than I thought. When someone at the table congratulated Thomas on his recent raise, I smiled and said, "Well, guess all those late nights with your boss finally paid off, though maybe I should be the one taking credit." It was supposed to be funny, the kind of sharp line people repeat later with a laugh. A few people chuckled, a few looked down. Elliot coughed into his napkin. Thomas froze. I didn't understand the look on his face, shock mixed with something like betrayal. I waved it off, saying, "Relax, it's a joke." But even as the conversation stumbled forward, I felt the air shift. The laughter had stopped meaning what I thought it did. On the ride home, Thomas didn't speak. I tried to lighten the mood, saying everyone was too stiff, that humor made people remember you. He finally looked at me and said quietly, "They'll remember you, all right." I thought he was being dramatic. I had no idea that one careless line, said for attention, would be replayed in meetings, whispered in hallways, and twisted into something that would wreck his career and our marriage. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. Thomas had been pacing the living room since noon, straightening his tie over and over. He cared too much about this dinner. It wasn't just another company event. It was his chance to show Elliot Crane, the firm director, that he was ready for a promotion. I kept teasing him, telling him he was acting like a kid going to prom. He didn't laugh. He never did when he was nervous. When he left to pick up the dry cleaning, I poured myself a glass of wine and stared at my reflection in the mirror. I looked good. Black dress, red lipstick, hair perfect. Thomas didn't say it often enough, but I knew what people saw when I walked into a room. I'd been told I had presence, and I liked that word. Presence made up for the things I didn't have, like patience or humility. At the gala, everything sparkled. The tables were white linen, the wine endless, the laughter polished and practiced. I could tell these people had been trained to talk in half smiles and careful compliments. Thomas blended right in. I didn't. I wasn't going to spend the night nodding politely while men explained things I didn't ask about. I wanted to be noticed. Elliot, his boss, was holding court near the bar. Tall, charming, mid-40s, with that expensive confidence men like Thomas admired. He greeted me warmly, kissed the air beside my cheek, and called me Mrs. Voss, the famous event planner. I laughed and said I wasn't famous yet, but I was working on it. He said something like, "With that kind of energy, you'll get anywhere you want." I saw Thomas's shoulders stiffen. When we sat down, I made sure to keep the conversation light. I joked about architecture being the art of being right in slow motion, and people laughed. I could feel the rhythm of the table bending toward me. I liked it. Then came the moment. Someone, a woman from HR, I think, raised her glass and congratulated Thomas on the small raise he'd just gotten. "Ah, yes," Elliot said smoothly. "Thomas is one of our quiet achievers." I smiled, maybe too wide, maybe too long, and said, "Well, if sleeping with the boss helped get that raise, I guess it was worth it." There was a pause, an awful, heavy pause. For a second, I expected everyone to laugh. It was clearly a joke. That's what people did at these things: tease, flirt, exaggerate. But the laughter that followed was short and uncertain. Elliot gave a small, uneasy chuckle and muttered, "Well, that's one way to climb the ladder." Thomas's face turned a color I'd never seen before, something between red and gray. He smiled tightly and said nothing. The air around us went stiff. Someone changed the subject, but it was too late. The rest of dinner passed like walking barefoot on glass. I tried to make small talk, tried to repair the tension with charm, but every sentence sounded wrong. Even when Elliot raised a toast to new beginnings, I could hear something bitter in his tone. On the way home, Thomas drove in silence. The city lights flickered across his face, and I could tell he was holding something in. I kept saying, "You know it was a joke, right?" He didn't answer. I laughed a little, trying to shake him out of it. "Come on," everyone laughed. Finally, he said quietly, "They didn't laugh with you, Nadia. They laughed at me." That stung. "Oh, please," I said, "don't make it bigger than it is." "You made it big the second you said it," he replied. His voice was calm, too calm. "Do you even know what that sounded like?" I crossed my arms. "It sounded like humor. Something this firm could use more of." He shook his head. "It sounded like you were confirming every rumor people whisper about office wives. Do you realize how that reflects on me?" I turned toward the window. "You're acting paranoid." He sighed, long and tired. "You don't realize what you just did." When we got home, he went straight to bed. I opened another bottle of wine and scrolled through my phone, pretending I didn't care. But my stomach felt tight. I replayed the moment again and again. The look on Elliot's face, the awkward laughter, the hush that followed. I told myself people would forget by morning. They always did. But they didn't. The next morning, Thomas left early for work. He didn't kiss me goodbye like usual. I brushed it off, assuming he was sulking. He'd cool off after a few hours. I spent the day convincing myself that nothing serious would come from one stupid joke. People at those dinners drank too much, said worse things. But when he came home that night, I knew something was different. He dropped his briefcase on the floor and didn't look at me. I asked how his day was. He said, "Interesting." His tone made my skin prickle. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked. "It means HR called me in," he said. I froze. "What for?" He looked at me for a long time before answering. "Someone filed a report about what you said last night." I laughed, but it sounded wrong. "That's insane. Who would report a joke?" "Apparently half the table heard it," he said, "and someone thought it implied something inappropriate between you and Elliot." "That's ridiculous," I said quickly. "They know it was a joke." "Do they?" His voice was so calm it scared me. Because Elliot didn't deny it right away. He laughed. He laughed because it was funny, I shot back. He laughed because he didn't know what else to do, Thomas said quietly. "Now people think I used my wife to get a promotion." "That's not my fault if they can't take a joke," I snapped. "Maybe you should stop caring what everyone thinks." He stared at me. "My job depends on what people think." I rolled my eyes. "You're so dramatic." He walked away into the bedroom and closed the door. Over the next few days, things got worse. The firm held a follow-up meeting with HR. Thomas told me they were doing it as a formality, but I could tell he was humiliated. He started coming home later, eating dinner in silence, spending hours on his laptop. When I tried to talk to him, he just said, "Not now." I called my friend Sophie and vented. She laughed and said, "Men are ridiculous. They can dish it out but can't handle a little tease." I agreed. It made me feel better, at least for a few minutes. But at night, the quiet in the apartment was unbearable. I caught Thomas staring at me once, his eyes tired, not angry, just empty. I asked if he still believed I was faithful. He said, "That's not the point. It's about respect." Respect. That word made me furious. "You're acting like I slept with him," I said. He turned away. "You might as well have. The room is the same." A few days later, he got an email from HR about an ongoing inquiry into unprofessional conduct. He printed it and left it on the kitchen counter like a warning. I picked it up, read it twice, and slammed it down. "This is ridiculous," I said when he came in. "You're letting them control the story." "They're controlling it because you gave them one," he said. "You could defend me." "I'm defending myself," he replied. That night, he slept on the couch. I woke up at 2 a.m. and stood in the doorway, watching him. I wanted to wake him, to make him talk, to make him understand I wasn't the villain here. But I couldn't bring myself to say the words that mattered. Instead, I whispered, "You're supposed to know I didn't mean it." The next morning, he was gone before sunrise. I texted him, "We need to talk." He didn't reply. By noon, Sophie called saying people online were gossiping about the boss's wife who made things weird at the gala. She thought it was hilarious. I didn't. My stomach twisted when I saw a comment under a photo from the event. Wonder if she actually did it for the promotion. When Thomas came home, I tried to act normal. "I'll handle this," I told him. "I'll call Elliot, clear everything up." He shook his head. "Don't." "Why not?" "Because you'll make it worse." "You think I can't fix a rumor?" I said. "I'm the one who started it, aren't I?" He sighed. "Exactly. I should have listened. But I didn't. I couldn't stand feeling powerless. The next morning, I called Elliot's assistant and said I wanted to speak to him privately. She hesitated, then scheduled me for a short slot after lunch. When I showed up at the office, I could feel eyes on me. I smiled like I didn't notice. Elliot's door was open, and he looked startled when I walked in. "Nadia," he said carefully, "this isn't a good time." I ignored him. "I just wanted to say sorry for the joke. It got out of hand." He rubbed his temples. "You shouldn't be here. HR's involved now. Anything you say—" "Oh, come on," I interrupted. "You know I didn't mean it. You could tell them that, right?" He gave me this tight, professional smile. "I've already said what needed to be said." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means this conversation never happened," he said, "for your sake and mine." He walked out of his own office, leaving me standing there like a fool. When Thomas found out later that night, because of course someone had seen me there, he didn't yell. He just said, "You went behind my back again." "I was trying to help," I said. "You were trying to save yourself," he replied. He slept on the couch again. This time I didn't follow. I poured a drink, sat by the window, and told myself he was overreacting. But even as I said it out loud, the words sounded hollow. By the end of that week, he stopped touching me at all. No goodnight kisses, no small talk, not even casual glances. We moved through the apartment like ghosts. I tried to start a fight just to feel something, but he wouldn't take the bait. He'd just say, "I'm tired." That's when I knew I was losing him, not to another woman, but to my own mouth. He'd always told me words had weight. I used to laugh and say, only if people believe them. But now everyone did, and there was no joke left to hide behind. A week after the gala, everything started to crumble for real. The firm was buzzing with gossip, and somehow my joke had turned into a story with details I'd never said. Apparently, I'd admitted to having drinks alone with Elliot more than once. Someone even claimed they'd seen us leaving an event together, though I hadn't, At least, not alone. It didn't matter. Truth didn't stand a chance once people had something juicier to believe. Thomas came home one evening later than usual. He looked worn down, his tie half loosened, his face pale. He set his briefcase on the counter and said quietly, "Elliot had a meeting with HR today." I blinked. "About what?" He just looked at me. That silence said everything. I started pacing. "Okay, but that's good, right? He'll tell them it's nothing, that it was just a stupid joke." Thomas shook his head. He told them there had been inappropriate comments made by an employee's spouse that created a hostile environment. I froze. "He said that?" "Yes," he said. "And he mentioned that he's maintaining distance from me for professionalism." "That's ridiculous," I snapped. "He's making it sound like I actually did something." Thomas just stared at me. "Did you?" The question hit like a slap. "You can't be serious," I said. "You think I'd actually—" "I think you like attention more than you like boundaries," he said softly. I laughed in disbelief. "Wow, you'd rather believe gossip than your own wife." "I'd rather not have to choose," he said, and walked away. That night I couldn't sleep. My thoughts ran in circles. I started convincing myself this was all his fault. If Thomas hadn't been so uptight, if he'd laughed along, none of this would have blown up. The next morning, I decided to fix things myself. I drove to Elliot's office again, without telling Thomas. His assistant looked startled when I showed up, but let me wait in the hallway. When Elliot finally appeared, his expression tightened. "Nadia," he said under his breath, "this isn't appropriate." "Oh, stop," I said. "I'm just here to clear things up. You know this is getting out of control, right?" He glanced around. "You shouldn't be here. People are talking." "Then tell them the truth," I said. He sighed. "The truth doesn't matter anymore. The damage is done." "So that's it? You're just going to let me take the blame?" He looked at me, his tone suddenly cold. "You made the joke. You dragged my name into it. I'm cleaning it up." I felt the sting of humiliation, but I forced a smile. "Wow. Very noble of you." "Go home, Nadia," he said, "before you make it worse." That phrase, "before you make it worse," followed me all the way to the parking lot. When Thomas came home that night, he was quiet again. I told him I'd gone to see Elliot, thinking he'd appreciate my initiative. He didn't. He just stared at me for a long time, then said, "You went back there after I told you not to." "I was trying to help you," I said. "No," he said calmly. "You were trying to help yourself." He walked into the bedroom and shut the door. That used to be the signal that the conversation was over. But this time, it felt like more than that. It felt like a wall I couldn't climb. A few days later, I found out through Sophie that HR had officially opened an internal investigation. Not about Thomas, but about external misconduct linked to professional reputation. That was their polite way of saying me. Sophie laughed when she told me. "Honestly, this is insane," she said. "You made one joke and now they're acting like you burned the building down." But even she sounded uneasy. When I asked her to meet for drinks that weekend, she said she was busy. The rumor kept spreading. People started treating Thomas differently at work, some sympathetic, others smug. One coworker, apparently, asked him if the story was true. He told me that later, standing in the kitchen with his hands shaking. "Do you understand what you've done to me?" he asked. I said, "You're overreacting. It'll pass." He stared at me like I was someone he didn't recognize. "It's already passed, Nadia. My promotion's gone." That was when I finally saw the exhaustion in his face, the kind that doesn't come from work, but from disappointment. He wasn't angry anymore. He'd stopped expecting me to fix anything. That scared me more than his anger ever could. The next morning, he didn't even drink the coffee I made. He left early without saying goodbye. Later that afternoon, Margaret, his mother, called. I should have ignored it, but I answered. "Nadia," she said, her tone sharp, "what exactly happened at that dinner?" "Nothing," I said, forcing a laugh. It was a misunderstanding. I heard it was a joke about your husband and his boss, she said. You think that's funny? I didn't mean anything by it, I said. People need to relax. She was quiet for a second, then said, You don't need to cheat on someone to ruin them, you know. You just need to humiliate them in public. That line hit like a blade. I hung up before she could say more. That night, Thomas didn't come home. I waited until midnight before calling him. He didn't answer. Around 2 a.m, I got a text. Staying with Mom for a few days. He didn't say goodnight. He didn't say I love you. Just that. I sat on the couch staring at my phone until the screen went dark. The silence in our apartment was unbearable. Every sound felt amplified. The hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock, my own breathing. I couldn't take it. I needed to feel in control again. So when Sophie told me there was another firm event that weekend, a casual networking mixer, I decided to go. She tried to warn me not to. Thomas might not like that, she said carefully. He's not here to stop me, I said. I showed up wearing a silver dress that caught the light when I moved. People turned when I walked in, which was exactly what I wanted. I smiled like I owned the room. Elliot was there too, surrounded by a group of younger associates. When he saw me, his expression faltered for a second, then settled into polite indifference. I walked straight up to him and said, Relax. I'm not here to cause trouble. He nodded stiffly. Good. But then someone from the group, one of the smug ones, laughed and said, Hey, careful, boss. Don't get her in trouble again. The others chuckled. Elliot gave a weak smile. My pride flared. I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, Oh, please, if I wanted to get him in trouble, he'd already be out of a job. The laughter that followed was sharp and mean. Elliot's face went red. He muttered something about needing air and walked off. I stayed, pretending I didn't care. Someone bought me another drink, then another. By the end of the night, people were snapping photos for social media, me laughing too hard, leaning too close to Elliot when he returned to say goodbye. The next morning, one of those photos was circulating through the office. Thomas's name was tagged in a comment under it. Guess the rumor wasn't just a joke after all. When he came home that evening, he looked at me like he'd aged 10 years in a week. What were you thinking? He asked. I was having fun, I said defensively. You told everyone I ruined your career. I might as well enjoy it. He didn't raise his voice. You're not helping. You're humiliating both of us. Oh, now you care, I snapped. You left me alone in that apartment like a criminal. You made yourself one, he said. That was it. He grabbed a bag from the bedroom and walked toward the door. Where are you going? I shouted. Somewhere I can breathe, he said. He didn't slam the door. He didn't yell. He just left quietly, like a man stepping out of smoke. The next day, HR cleared him of any wrongdoing, but placed him on administrative leave to preserve professional integrity. Translation: He wasn't guilty, but they still didn't want him around while the gossip lingered. I told myself it wasn't fair, that they were punishing him for my sense of humor. But the truth was, I'd made him the face of a story he never asked to star in. A few days later, Margaret called again. I didn't answer. Then Sophie texted, Maybe lay low for a while. People are saying you embarrassed yourself at the mixer. Embarrassed myself. That phrase repeated in my head until it didn't even sound like words anymore. I stayed up that night drinking alone. At one point, I opened my phone and scrolled through old photos of me and Thomas. Our wedding, our first apartment, trips we couldn't afford. He was smiling in every one. I looked carefree, untouchable. But in that moment, all I saw was someone who mistook cruelty for charm. The next morning, I found a letter under the door. It was from a law office. The envelope had my name printed neatly on the front. No handwriting, no personal note. Inside were legal papers, a notice of separation, and a statement of intent to file for damages due to public defamation and reputational harm. My vision blurred. I read it 3 times before it sank in. He wasn't coming back. He wasn't even going to argue. He was going to end this quietly, legally, like he'd been planning it for weeks. I dropped the papers on the table and sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. Somewhere between the laughter I'd chased and the silence I'd created, I'd lost the one person who still believed I didn't mean what I said. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing. A message from Margaret. "He's staying here for now. Please don't contact him directly." I stared at it for a long time before tossing the phone aside. How dare she speak for him? How dare he hide behind his mother and a lawyer? The apartment felt different now. It wasn't home. It was evidence. His shirts were gone. His watch stand empty. The space he used to occupy, the quiet hum of his routines, had vanished. I opened the fridge, saw his labeled lunch boxes still stacked neatly on the top shelf, and felt a flash of rage. He couldn't leave so perfectly. He was supposed to be messy about it, impulsive. Not this calm, not this deliberate. Later that afternoon, Colin, the firm's legal representative, called. His voice was formal, almost kind, but not sympathetic. "Mrs. Voss, I'm calling on behalf of my client regarding the separation. You've received the notice?" "Yes," I said, gripping the counter, "and it's ridiculous. This isn't divorce material. It was a joke, a misunderstanding." "I understand," he said smoothly. "However, my client feels his reputation has been significantly damaged. This process is meant to protect both parties' interests." "Both?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean his?" "I mean both," he repeated in that steady lawyer tone that doesn't leave space for emotion. "You'll receive documentation outlining the financial and reputational boundaries moving forward." I asked if Thomas was listening, if he was there. Colin paused. "He's aware of this call." So that was it. He was listening, but refusing to speak to me directly. My throat tightened. "Tell him this is absurd," I said. "Tell him I love him." "I'll include your statement in the record," Colin said, and hung up. I spent the next hour pacing. The words, reputation, record, damages echoed in my head like a chorus. Thomas was turning our life into a case file. When Sophie came over that evening, she found me sitting at the dining table surrounded by papers. "You look like a suspect," she said lightly. "Maybe I am," I said. She poured wine without asking. "You're not. You just said the wrong thing to the wrong people. He'll calm down." "He's not calming down," I said. "He's building a case." Sophie frowned. "What case?" I pushed the letter toward her. She read the line aloud. "Intent to pursue legal remedy for defamation and reputational harm." Her eyes widened. "You've got to be kidding me." "I wish I was," I said. For the next few days, I waited for Thomas to change his mind. I imagined he'd show up at the door, tired and sorry, saying we'd both overreacted. But instead, I got another envelope. This one from his HR department. Inside was a report confirming his administrative leave was over, and he'd been transferred with commendation to another firm under a mutual partner. His reputation had recovered, apparently, but mine was the collateral damage. I went to my mother's place, hoping for sympathy. Grace listened while I read the letter out loud. When I finished, she said, "He's trying to look noble while making you look crazy. Typical man." "It's not that simple," I said quietly. "Of course it is," she replied. "He's punishing you for embarrassing him. That's what they do when they can't control you." But something in me knew that wasn't true. This wasn't revenge out of anger. It was revenge out of principle. He wasn't shouting, wasn't smearing my name online, wasn't playing dirty. He was doing it properly, the way only a man like him could. Carefully, legally, permanently. The following week, Colin requested that I attend a meeting to clarify outstanding points. I showed up at the law office wearing a blazer, trying to look composed. Thomas was already there, sitting across the room, pen in hand, eyes unreadable. He didn't look at me. Colin reviewed the documents. explaining that my statements at the firm events had led to substantiated professional consequences. There were emails from HR, written statements from co-workers, even a screenshot of my text to Sophie that night. The way Elliot looked at me when I said it, like he didn't mind, when they showed me that, I felt my face burn. "That was a joke," I said quietly. Colin nodded. "Intent is not the same as perception, Mrs. Voss. The perception was damaging." Thomas finally spoke then, voice low. "I just want this to end cleanly." I turned toward him, desperate for any flicker of warmth. "Cleanly?" I said. "You're dismantling our life like it's a spreadsheet." He looked at me for the first time in weeks. "You dismantled it the moment you made me a punchline." That line broke something in me, not because it was cruel, but because it was true. Afterward, I sat in my car outside the building, gripping the steering wheel until my hands hurt. The city noise around me felt far away. For the first time, I realized there was nothing left to argue for. He wasn't punishing me anymore. He was just done. That night, I packed a small bag and left the apartment for my mother's house. As I closed the door, I glanced once at the living room, the spot where we used to drink coffee on Sundays, the couch where we'd planned vacations we never took. All of it was still there, but it already belonged to someone else. The court hearing was scheduled 2 weeks later. Simple, procedural, no witnesses, no fireworks, just signatures and statements. The kind of ending that doesn't feel like an ending until it's over. When I walked into the courthouse, Thomas was already there with Colin. He looked different, lighter, like someone who had finally put down something heavy. I'd told myself I would look poised and unbothered, but seeing him like that cracked my composure instantly. Colin handed me the settlement papers. Most of it was financial and procedural. Division of assets, separation agreement, a formal acknowledgement of public defamation. I skimmed the lines without really reading them until one caught my eye. All public references to the incident are to cease immediately, including online commentary and social references, under penalty of civil action. I looked up. "You think I'd talk about this publicly?" Thomas didn't answer. Colin said, "We're simply protecting reputational boundaries." I laughed softly. "Reputation, that's all any of you care about." Thomas finally met my eyes. It's all I had left. Those words silenced me. For once, I didn't have a clever retort. I signed the papers, my hand trembling, just slightly. Colin thanked me for my cooperation. Thomas signed his name right after mine, quick and neat. He didn't even pause. When it was done, Colin shook both our hands and left us alone for a brief moment. The air between us felt too quiet. I said, "You could have talked to me instead of turning it into this." He nodded once. "I tried. You laughed." He started to walk toward the door. I called after him, "So that's it? You're just done?" He turned, his expression unreadable. "You wanted to be remembered. Now you will be." He left before I could speak again. Outside, the sun was bright but cold. My mother was waiting by the curb, her arms crossed, face tight with disappointment that wasn't entirely for me. She asked if I wanted to appeal. I shook my head. There's nothing to appeal. As we walked to the car, someone from the firm passed by, a junior architect who had been at the gala. He glanced at me quickly, then looked away. I wasn't a person anymore. I was a story, a warning. Later that evening, when I returned to my mother's house, there was an envelope waiting on the porch. Inside was a single piece of paper, an official HR notice confirming that I was banned from attending future firm functions or entering firm property due to prior misconduct. The same firm Thomas had already left. The irony almost made me laugh. I sat down on the porch steps, watching the light fade. The neighborhood dogs barked, children shouted, cars passed, life moving forward, while mine stood still. For the first time, I didn't try to defend myself. I didn't rehearse excuses or twist the story into something less ugly. I just sat there and let it be true. I'd done this. I'd turned a man's life into a punchline, and then mine into the aftermath. A soft wind picked up, blowing the edges of the HR letter across my lap. I held it down with my palm. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang. Maybe Thomas was right. Maybe people really do remember jokes longer than truths. Because every time I close my eyes now, I still hear it. My voice echoing through that room. Everyone half laughing, half shocked, and Thomas sitting there, pretending it didn't hurt. It wasn't funny anymore. It never was. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.